Welcome to A Pound of Flesh, a flesh and blood trading card game podcast. On the pod, we dedicate 60 minutes to one question and discuss it in depth. My name is Scowling, and on today's episode, I am honored to have Jacob Clements with me to discuss a topic. Jacob won the Calling Florence late last year and has been on an absolute tear ever since. He attends events all over the world, and just mentioning a few, he's been to the Calling Memphis, Kobe, and Lyon since Florence alone, just to give you an idea how much he travels. He has been incredibly consistent with numerous top three placing in those events this year alone. And at the moment, he is in spot number 2 for the Player of the Year race with just 14 points within distance of Brody Spurlock, who's currently in position number 1. So we're approaching Worlds towards the end of the year, but there's still every chance that he could walk away with the Player of the Year award. So without further ado, welcome, Jacob. Thank you very much for joining me today. How are you doing?
I'm doing good. Good day so far. How are you?
I'm doing very well, thank you. And thank you again for joining us. So, time is short. Without further ado, let's dive into the main topic of the pod. And that is, what do you recommend a player in Flesh and Blood do to get better at the game?
I think the best way to get better at the game, or the biggest barrier to improving that I see, is really something in the kind of mindset or way people think about or approach Flesh and Blood. So often I see people after a game, they'll put their hands up and they'll say, nothing I could have done. And this is true in some cases. I mean, Flesh and Blood is a card game, there's still variance. But one of the things that makes me so excited to spend so much time traveling and playing Flesh and Blood is this feeling in Flesh and Blood that we don't really get, mana screwed or mana flooded in the way that you might in something like Magic, which I played before, where there are these true non games. And I'm maybe someone who played Magic very competitively could tell me about how actually I'm wrong to even think that. But in Flesh and Blood, so often when I lose games, if I like really reflect on it or talk or in testing talk to my opponent about it afterwards, I'll come away with like tangible things I could have done different. And like across the tournament, like the Calling this last weekend, I'll think that in most or even all of my losses, I could have won if I'd made better decisions. And so having the right like framework or people around you to like drive you to find those mistakes, I think is the best way to improve at Flesh and Blood.
It's actually a really good point, and it kind of goes back to my experience last night. I just played an Armory. I'm playing KO, the new one, Underhanded
Yeah.
Cheat. I played 2 games. I lost both my games, and honestly, the hands didn't go my way. And afterwards, like, oh, if the hands had only gone more my way, I could have won both those games. Like, yeah, but then you have to reflect. Okay, what could I have done differently with those hands? With the 4 cards that I'm given to still give me a better chance of winning. I think it's a really good point that you make.
Yeah.
So you're talking about mental fortitude here. Is there a specific moment when you learned about this and when you implemented this yourself that you remember?
Well, so this idea or a tangent of it first came out because Brody Spurlock, when I was at Pro Tour Los Angeles, I overheard him talking to someone else about this thought experiment or question about whether a supercomputer who was like perfect at Flesh and Blood in every way, like what its win rate or top 8% would be at these large field tournaments. And the person he was talking to was saying, "Oh well, of course, even with perfect play, there's still variance. So it's still probably like top 8 a small percent of the time." And Brody said, "No, no, I think for this and that reason, really a good player." And I heard this and was interested by the idea, and in hindsight, perhaps rather rudely injected myself into the conversation to interrogate this more. But that conversation, hearing him explain why Flesh and Blood really, if you played it correctly or optimally, you would just win like almost all your games. It like planted the seed. And so then whenever I'd play a game and I'd lose, I would think, was there something I could have done? And the more I thought about if there was something I could have done, the more times I reflected that there was. And it like creates this cycle, at least for me, to keep like reflecting and improving and reflecting and improving.
Yeah, That makes a lot of sense. So I get what you're saying, and I think reflecting like that is definitely something to bring everybody forward. Now, in my experience, a game end can be very emotional, right? And I imagine for
Yeah,
somebody like you who plays at very high levels with a lot on the line, that can be even more intense. I recently saw a game where you won a stream. I think you were playing Verdant, just at a calling last weekend, I believe, and it kind of just it was so intense. You jumped up and you got away from the table, right? And obviously, when you win and you have that intense moment,
yeah,
that's awesome. But it can also be the other way, right? It can be, well,
yeah.
you lose your win and in. How do you ground yourself to get into that mindset and to start thinking about what you could have done differently instead of being in that frustration?
I think it's important to give yourself a moment to feel the strong emotions that come with winning or losing. It is a game and we are human. And so like take the moment to like properly feel what you're feeling. Like if you just try and like push it down, it can like kind of fester or whatever. But then after giving yourself, you know, couple of minutes maybe, even if that's what you need, to try and like recenter yourself and think like, all right, there's going to be many more. I mean, unless your loss was so traumatic you're about to quit the game forever, there's probably going to be many more games of Flesh and Blood, and
Yeah.
the games of Flesh and Blood in the future are the only ones you can control. And so kind of, like taking that moment to think like, this was only one game. I could play, potentially, an unlimited number of future games, and those are the ones I can currently control for. So how am I gonna control for those ones?
I actually really like that because a while back somebody told me it's like, don't worry about the things that have already happened, right? It's like there's nothing more you can do about that. It's
Yeah,
happened. The situation is there, and I would often get frustrated because something happened to me in the game and that put me behind or that lost me the game. And then I was told, don't worry about that. Think about what you can control and what you can do, right? So if you're being hit by a command and conquer and the pummel on top of that, well, you're going to lose your arsenal. You're going to lose a card from hand. You're going to take maybe up to 10 damage. It's happened. Like it is what it is. Think about what you can do from this point forward with the hand that you have and the situation that you have and reorient yourself. I still struggle with that, but I think it's
yeah.
it's it's really good to frame that. How do you objectively differentiate between a situation where you can actually could have done something or a situation where, well, now at this point it was out of my hand and really there was nothing else I could have done?
One thing that's easy to do sometimes is start like hindsighting yourself. Like maybe, you make a play where your opponent's attacking with a command and conquer and you decide to block six and then they have the pummel. And it might be easy to say, like I should have not blocked, but you have to, be thinking about the information you had at the time you made the decision. And so sometimes, and it's also sometimes hard to know, if I'd done something different, my opponent might have done something different and the game goes off on a different track. But I find thinking about, maybe spots where you're unsure what to do, thinking what really should I have gone the other way, and talking to your opponent after the game if they're in the mood for it. And so this
Yeah.
is where, having a good group of people to play like either test games with or even just, at lower stakes events, like at your armory or whatever. Because at the cooling level, after the game, you and your opponent both might not really want to have a conversation about what could have happened. Like the game you referenced on stream, it's like such a my opponent's just gone out of top eight contention.
Yeah.
They probably don't want me to be like, oh, if I'd done this, what would you have done? And you got to respect that. So in tournament, it's a bit trickier, but definitely in games where you have a good rapport with your opponent and it's not super high stakes, it's good to talk to them as the best way to kind of tease out what might have happened if you'd gone a different way, and they can help you remember what certain hands were. If you're like, oh, maybe against a Katsu opponent, if you let them hit, you can be like, if I'd have given you the armor there, what would your follow up
Hmm.
have been, or this and that. But I play a lot of Gravy Bones recently, and
Yes.
he has a lot of really interesting decisions about the like macro game state, and when it's worth it to do a play that will like leave you with no gold, or if you're gonna block with a port side or keep it, or like take the damage to arsenal it because it could help you on a future turn we have allies. And in general, I find when I reflect on his game states, the first thing I always ask myself, if I had a game where I like struggled to get going, is I
Hmm.
said, did I ever, make a decision that jeopardized getting going? So a good example is I had a stream game at Shizuoka
Yeah.
where it's an against Nacilio, and by all appearances, it's just like I just never get into the game. I never make a gold. I never start like playing allies from the graveyard. And this would be a super easy game to just put your hands up and say nothing I could have done. But I watched it back, and this is an advantage of being on stream. I reflected on the game afterwards, and turn zero, I like made some blocking decisions that meant that I ended up not holding any. I just had a rigor mortis in hand. I blocked with my other three cards, but I could have taken one damage to hold a jittery bones in my hand, and then because I like risked drawing three new blind cards rather than holding a card that I knew would help me start playing the game. I then, the three cards I drew weren't helpful, and so I never
Hmm.
got to start playing the game. But if I just took 1 point of damage to, hold a bit of insurance, I could have had a bit more function of the game. And
Yeah.
still might not have been a great game for me. But just thinking about, any spots that you took like a risky line can be helpful. And one product, if I mean, really, you can just do this habit of just reflecting your games afterwards,
Yeah.
you know, without anything. But Codex Journals is a product that
Yes.
I've recently been reached out to and got an affiliate code with. If anyone does want to buy it, it'll be in the description. But can help you get in that habit where it's a life pad, and then on the back side, it has a like structured note taking, so you can
Yes.
reflect on what you did. And as I say, you don't need to buy this. You can just start doing this on the back of your life pad or in your head or any other way. But if having something to like prompt you physically would be helpful, I think this product can be helpful for that.
That really makes a lot of sense. I'm not affiliated with them, but I bought it as soon as I saw it come out as well because it's one of the lessons I learned early on. It's best to reflect about the game and how it went and where you went wrong when it's fresh in your mind. And as you mentioned earlier on, one of the things that is really good is asking your opponent when the situation is right. It's like, okay, this and this happened. Do you think it would have been better if I done this in a different way? Or where did you see the big mistake? Where would you have done different? Like sometimes you play an opponent and you're really surprised by what they're doing because you're expecting a different reaction. And those are mostly the moments where maybe you get ahead, unless they have a game plan which just completely wasn't on your radar. But I think that makes sense, and I do advocate for taking notes as well. So you mentioned you're traveling a lot, right? We talked about it earlier on. You were in Hamburg this last weekend. Before that, you were in Japan. Is this something that helps you in this regard, where you spend time in your hotel room to where you can reflect, or do you think traveling as much as you do gets more in the way of it?
Uh, I mean, it costs time. I mean, at the end of the day, time is the like ultimate currency, or whatever
Yeah.
sayings to that effect. And so traveling does like trade off time, but being in person with people whom like you respect and you value their input. I mean, often at these tournaments, my friends and teammates will come up to, so often between rounds, we'll just tell each other the hand we had turns. We'll say, okay, so you have these four cards in your hand, and then you compass when you saw this card. So these are the five cards you're working with. How would you have played the turn zero? And so
Yes.
often it's different from what they did. And my friend Justin, one time, he gave me the hand, and then he's like, before I did it, he wrote something on his phone, and then he told me, and then I was said, why was that card sided in? And then he showed me, and he'd written that on his phone. He'd known I was going to say that to him. But yeah, having this ability to, when you don't necessarily live with the people you're, testing with and working with on the deck, being able to be in person with them is invaluable for.
Absolutely, yeah. If you're part of this testing group of this team and you travel a lot and so they and then you can actually exchange the thoughts in person, that's always, it just makes the path shorter as well than if you send a message back.
Yeah.
This asynchronous way of communication is good internationally, but it's always better in person, and the paths are
Yeah.
shorter. Fantastic. This is really, really good. And we're coming up to the end of the pod. Is there anything else you wanted to mention, or do you think we've covered the main points?
No, I think we've covered the main points.
Fantastic.
Just this like voracious appetite for improvement is what I advise.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what keeps us in the game, right? We always want to get
Yeah,
better, no matter how bad the game when there's always one more. Let's just get
Yeah.
one more, knock it out. Fantastic. So, for anybody interested in those codex journals that were mentioned by Jacob, I'll put the link under the episode and you can check that out. Otherwise, thank you so much for jumping on, Jacob. It was a great pleasure to talk to you. I wish you tons of success. And you know what? Despite everything, I think it's already been a fantastic year for you. So,
For sure.
upwards from here, right?
Thanks. Yeah, fingers crossed. Hopefully by the time you watch this, player of the year.
Exactly. I'll root for you. I'll root for you for sure. All right. Thank you so much. Have a fantastic day.
Thanks. You too.